Hello, and welcome back to Miss Bell's classroom. So last time that we met, we talked about the Neolithic age. Today we're going to talk about the Bronze Age and kind of what happened during that time. So if we think about that, we've got, I'm just going to make a little timeline here. Split it, and we're going to call this the Mesolithic period, and then we're going to call this the Neolithic, and then we're going to split this. This will be the Bronze, and then this right here is the Iron Age. So after the Neolithic came the Bronze Age, so we're going to talk about that today and kind of what that meant for society and humans. So when was it? So the Bronze Age began in 2400 BC, about 4,400 years ago. After the end of the Neolithic period, the Bronze Age ended in 800 BC, so about 2,800 years ago, at the start of the Iron Age. So the Bronze Age lasted for about 1,600 years. So this is kind of like the prehistoric times. There was a large period of time for which we have no written records. We call this prehistory. So starting from evidence of the first early humans, it is split into three sections. So the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. So the Bronze Age lasted around 1,600, 1,500 years, depending on where you were. So it's a little different for the Middle East, India and China, Eastern Europe and Mediterranean, and then also in Britain. So everything lasted a little bit different. So in the Bronze Age, where people lived, farming became more and more important in the Bronze Age. So it really affected landscape. So in the Middle Bronze Age, the weather became warmer, but in the later Bronze Age, it turned colder and wetter again. So this really affected where people lived and what they were growing and the food that they were able to grow. So in the Bronze Age, Britain would have been a patchwork of fields and forests. However, in the Middle Bronze Age, people started making larger systems of fields divided by hedges and ditches. So field systems would have been built around farmsteads. These farmsteads were made of a small group of roundhouses, which were just round post-built structures where people lived. As the weather improved, people started to spread out into places that they could not really live before, such as low-lying areas in the south of East Britain and to higher parts as well. But then when the weather became worse, people had to leave some of those places because they could not grow crops or keep animals anymore. So this meant people were concentrated into certain areas. So how people lived, so think about how do you think the increased focus on farming affected people's lives? Kind of think about that. So in later Bronze Age, the weather became colder and wetter, as said earlier, so making parts of areas, not suitable to live in. So think about how that kind of affected relationships with each other and what people had to do as the weather got colder. The Bronze Age farmers kept cows, sheep, and pigs, but also started growing more crops and even used horses to plow their fields. The increased focus on farming, especially crops, led to larger field systems and more permanent farmsteads. Some people would still have moved around with their animals, but others would need to stay in the farmsteads to look after the crops. So again, with the colder and wetter weather, during the latter Bronze Age meant people had to abandon some areas. This meant that people were squeezed into other areas, which might have led to competition and conflict. So settlements became more defensive, using ditches, fences, and hilltops. So these might have been used to keep kind of neighboring groups out as the weather got colder and conflict started to rise. So the Bronze Age was really exciting because people started using a new type of material. What do you think it might have been? Bronze. So why do you think that might have been important? Okay, so with the arrival of new materials, do you think flint and pottery were still used like people in the Neolithic used them? So the Bronze Age had new technology, and this was the first time people started using metal. So copper was first, followed shortly afterwards by bronze, which is just a mixture of copper and tin. And gold was also used. So in the early Bronze Age, objects made from these metals were probably being used as symbols of power rather than actual practical tools. So carrying a gold button, bronze axe, or copper dagger would show how important you were. You had power. So although people in the Bronze Age started using metal, they continued making tools from flint and making pottery. So people started making a new arrowhead called the barbed and tanged arrowhead. So people use plants to make a lot of things as well. Flexible willow was used to make finishings and furnishings and fences. Wood and bark were used to make plates and planters, and plant fibers were used to make string and fabric. So why the Bronze Age? Why bronze? So just like the Stone Age was so called because early humans made tools from stone, the Bronze Age was called Bronze Age because humans started making tools from bronze. So bronze was the alloy made from copper and tin, which is just a metal made by combining two or more metals to improve properties. So why bronze? So copper is a soft metal, but when it's melted and added to tin, the result bronze is much harder and durable than copper or stone. So it was used for tools, weapons, and armor, as well as building materials like decorative tiles. So there was an early form of bronze in the north known as the arsenic bronze, which was a natural alloy that could be dug from the ground. And then the bronze alloy made from copper and tin was developed later. So the copper and tin had to be mined separately and then melted down and combined to make bronze. So kind of thinking about when people started using bronze in different regions. So in the Middle East, it was they started using it between 3600 to 3500 BC. In India and China, it was 2500 to 2300 BC. In Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean, it was 3500 to 3000 BC. So bronze had started to be used in Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean, but was still difficult and expensive to make during that time. So just depending on the area, bronze kind of came in at different times. And then in 2100 BC, bronze had landed in Britain. It was used to make weapons, tools, and even hairbrushes. So things like daggers, blades, spearheads, axes, and anything that used to be made from stone or flint was then made from stronger and now more durable bronze. So woodworking techniques improved during this time. There was better quality during this time as well. So, and again, the weather in Britain had been affected, as the weather had become warmer and drier at the end of the Stone Age. The Bronze Age kind of saw another change in the climate. So the weather forced people to move from the hills, which were easier to defend, and move into the valleys, where it was easier to grow food and find shelter. The spread of farming meant that the end of large burial sites, as the fields were needed for animals to graze and large areas of woodland started to be cut down to make more land available for farming. Another thing that happened during the Bronze Age was the Stonehenge. So a massive stone circle was built at the site of an earthwork, and the burial ground from Stone Age is in southwest England. So it was in the process of being built and adapted for over 1,000 years. Some of the stones used originally came all the way from South Wales, so no one really knows why it was built. Another thing that's interesting about the Bronze Age was the beaker culture. So there were more immigrants to Britain during the Bronze Age. Some of the new arrivals were the bell beaker people. They have been named after the distinctive bell-shaped pottery they make, mainly for drinking form. So the pottery was decorated with hands and made by a comb or cold pressed into the day. The pots were also used to store copper, store food, and used as urns. It was possible that bronze was first brought over to Britain by the bell beaker folk. The beaker culture also includes types of weapons, jewelry, and other ornaments that were new to Britain. So they immigrated well with the people already living in Britain and even made improvements to Stonehenge. So what type of houses did they live in? In the Bronze Age, people no longer used one dwelling for everything. A farming household might have consisted of 2 houses. A main house would be used to live in, and an out-of-home house was used for cooking and textile production. So what clothes did they wear? Women would wear long woolen skirts and short tunics. So they started to use wool, which was now woven into clothes during this time. Men would wear knee-length wrap around skirts or kilt-like woolens, tunics, cloaks, one-piece garments, or round woolen hats. And then what did they believe in the Bronze Age? So Bronze Age people made round barrows, burial mounds to bury some of their dead ancestors, which kind of led to more important places of landscape. So wetter weather made lowland areas more difficult to live in, as marshes came up and swallowed up fields. So in the early Bronze Age, people were buried in round burial mounds called round barrows. Multiple people would be buried in a barrow, and over time barrows were built together in groups. The people buried in barrows were probably all related, and the barrows were built together to show that. So looking at a group of barrows in the Bronze Age would be like looking at your family tree. So in the Middle Bronze Age, people were mainly cremated. The cremations would be buried together and sometimes placed around earlier barrows, making a connection to ancestors. So round barrows were regularly built on hilltops and ridgelines, so you could see them all silhouetted against the sky for miles around. This would mean that Bronze Age people might be thinking about their ancestors quite a lot. In the later Bronze Age, people started depositing metal objects like swords and spearheads in the watery places, sometimes objects like swords were bent or hid in places, or if they were broken, as if to kill or sacrifice an object that had been broken. So this may have been Bronze Age people offering or trying to appeal to gods or some sort of unnatural like feature, so to try to stop the wetter weather and loss of their farmlands from growing into marshes. So that is all that I have for you about the Bronze Age. Next time we will talk about the Iron Age and kind of how the Iron Age came about after the Bronze Age. So I hope that you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you later. Goodbye.